My mother slid the leather check folder across the pristine white tablecloth and smiled the same way a shark smiles before biting. "You are late, Jasmine, so we went ahead and ordered without you. Since you missed the toast, you can handle the bill. It is the least you can do for our 40th anniversary." I opened the folder. $4,850. My brother-in-law, Caleb, swirled his glass of vintage red wine and chuckled. "Don't look so shocked, Jasmine. In my family, successful children fight for the privilege of treating their parents. Maybe that is why your people struggle to build generational wealth. You are too attached to pennies." I looked at the empty dessert plates, the 5 empty bottles of Chateau Margaux, and then at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me. They did not want my company, they wanted my credit card. That night, I did not just refuse to pay. I burned the bridge, the boat, and the entire river. Before I tell you how I turned this dinner into their worst nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the family bank account instead of a daughter. My name is Jasmine and I am 34 years old. I work as a financial risk assessor for one of the largest firms in Chicago. My entire life is built on calculating probability, analyzing loss, and detecting fraud. If a company is bleeding money while the CEO buys yachts, I am the one who spots it. I am the one who cuts the funding. Yet for over a decade, I failed to assess the risk right under my own roof. I was the reliable one, the sensible one, the one who drove a 5-year-old Honda Accord and lived in a modest condo so I could max out my 401k. My parents, Otis and Verna, were different. They loved the appearance of success more than success itself. They called it black excellence. I called it drowning in debt to impress strangers. And then there was my younger sister, Tiara. At 26, she was still finding herself, which apparently meant spending her days taking selfies for Instagram and her nights expecting someone else to foot the bill. But the newest addition to our chaotic dynamic was Caleb, Tiara's husband. Caleb was white, 30 years old, and worked in what he vaguely called real estate investment. He had a habit of lecturing me on economics and family values, despite the fact that I had never seen him pay for a single meal. The invitation for the anniversary dinner had come via a text message from my mother 3 days ago. "The Gilded Oak at 8 o'clock. Do not be late." The Gilded Oak was the kind of steakhouse where the waiters wore tuxedos and the air smelled of truffle oil and old money. It was not a place my parents could afford, but I assumed they had saved up for this milestone. I arrived at 7:55, dressed in my office blazer and slacks, feeling underdressed compared to the women in furs and diamonds sipping cocktails at the bar. When the hostess led me to the private circular booth in the back, I stopped in my tracks. They were not waiting for me. They were finished. The table was a graveyard of gluttony. Platters of devoured seafood towers, bones from tomahawk steaks, and half-eaten sides of lobster mac and cheese littered the cloth. My father Otis was leaning back in his chair, picking his teeth with a gold toothpick, his top button undone. Tiara was busy retouching her lipstick in her phone camera, and Caleb was signaling the waiter for another pour of wine. "Oh, look who decided to show up," my mother Verna said, her voice loud enough to turn heads at the nearby tables. I checked my watch. "I am 5 minutes early, Mom. You said 8 o'clock. Verna waved her hand dismissively, her diamond bracelets clinking. "Did I?" "Well, we were starving, so we sat down at 6. You cannot expect your father to wait on an empty stomach. The food here is divine, Jasmine. You really missed out. The kitchen just closed for main courses, but you can probably order a salad if you hurry." She did not look sorry. She looked expectant. The waiter arrived, looking relieved that I had appeared. He placed the black leather folder in the center of the table. "Who is taking this?" he asked politely. The silence that followed was deafening. My father looked at the ceiling. Tiara suddenly found a spot on her dress to obsess over. Caleb stared right at me, a smirk playing on his lips. My mother reached out, tapped the folder with a manicured fingernail, and slid it across the table until it rested in front of me. "Jasmine will take care of it," she announced, beaming at the waiter. She is the big shot executive in the family. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I opened the folder. The numbers seemed to dance before my eyes. $4,850.25. They had ordered 2 bottles of wine that cost $600 each. They had ordered the Wagyu beef tasting platter. They had ordered rounds of cognac that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I looked up at them. I haven't even had a glass of water, I said, my voice steady but low. You want me to pay $5,000 for a meal I didn't eat? My father scoffed, finally looking at me. It is our 40th anniversary, Jasmine. 40 years. You are really going to ruin the mood by counting pennies. After everything we sacrificed to put you through college, I paid for my own college, Dad, I reminded him. I worked 2 jobs. You guys spent my tuition fund on a timeshare in Florida that you lost to foreclosure 2 years later. Don't bring up the past, Verna snapped. It is tacky. Then Caleb leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He had that look in his eyes, the one he always got when he wanted to assert dominance. You know, Jasmine, this is what holds people back, this scarcity mindset. In my family, when my parents celebrate a milestone, my brothers and I fight over the check. We want to honor them. It is about gratitude. I looked at Caleb. His suit was ill-fitting and his watch was a knockoff Rolex details I had noticed the first time I met him. You are welcome to pay it then, Caleb, I said. Show us that abundance mindset you are always talking about. Honor my parents. Caleb laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I would love to, really. But my capital is tied up in a development project right now. Besides, this is a moment for you to step up. You are the one with the steady corporate paycheck. Don't be the bitter spinster sister who ruins the party. Tiara giggled. He got you there, Jazz. Just pay it. You can write it off as a business expense or something. You know how to manipulate the system. I looked around the table. They were not asking. They were demanding. They had planned this. They had come here 2 hours early, ordered the most expensive items on the menu, and consumed it all with the absolute certainty that Jasmine the doormat would arrive at 8 o'clock to clean up the mess. They saw me as nothing more than a walking wallet. The waiter was still standing there, shifting uncomfortably. I took a deep breath. The smell of the rich food was suddenly making me nauseous. For years I had done this. I had paid for the car repairs. I had paid for the bail money when Tiara got a DUI. I had paid for the vacations they claimed they deserved. But looking at the grease on my father's chin, and the arrogance in Caleb's eyes, something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a vault door closing. I am not paying this, I said. My mother stopped smiling. Excuse me, I am not paying almost $5,000 for food. I did not eat, and wine I did not drink. I will pay for a bottle of sparkling water if the waiter brings me one. But this bill, this belongs to you. Verna's eyes widened in genuine shock. She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Have you lost your mind? We don't have that kind of limit on our cards right now. We are moving money around for the new house. You know that. The new house. The mythical mansion they were always about to buy. That sounds like a risk assessment failure, I said, coldly. Caleb's face turned red. Listen here, Jasmine. You are embarrassing your parents in public. People are watching. Is this how you want to be seen? As the ungrateful daughter who leaves her elderly parents high and dry? I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was pure steel. I am not the one who ordered a $600 bottle of wine without a job, Caleb. And Mom, Dad, happy anniversary. Consider my refusal to enable this financial suicide my gift to you. I turned to the waiter. I would like a manager, please. I need to open a separate tab. You sit down right now. My father bellowed, his voice booming across the restaurant. The chatter in the room stopped. Every eye turned to our table. I did not sit down. I looked at my father, a man who had taught me that love was transactional, and I shook my head. No, I am done. Caleb stood up now, towering over me, trying to use his height to intimidate. You are making a mistake, Jasmine. You walk away now and you are cutting yourself off. You are proving exactly what I thought about you. You have no loyalty. Loyalty is not slavery, Caleb, I whispered. The manager, a tall woman in a sharp suit, approached the table with a serious expression. Is there a problem here? Yes, I said before anyone else could speak. I just arrived. These 4 people have finished their meal. I would like a glass of sparkling water, and I would like my check to be completely separate from theirs. I am not assuming liability for their bill. The manager looked at the ravaged table, then at my untouched setting, and finally at my determined face. She nodded slowly. Understood, miss. My mother gasped, clutching her chest as if I had physically struck her. You surely cannot be serious. You are going to leave us here. With this bill, I sat down in the empty chair, crossed my arms, and looked her dead in the eye. I am not leaving, Mom. I am going to sit right here and enjoy my water while you figure out how to pay for the feast you enjoyed. The war had begun, and they had no idea that I held the nuclear codes. The silence that followed my request was so heavy, it felt like it could crack the marble floors. The manager, a woman whose name tag read Lydia, blinked once, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal sheer bewilderment. She looked from my untouched place setting to the carnage of seafood shells and empty wine bottles on the other side of the table. I am sorry, my mother, Verna stammered, her voice pitching up an octave as it always did when she was losing control. My daughter is making a very poor joke. She has a strange sense of humor. Just put it all on one card. She will handle it. No, I will not, I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with the rising panic in my mother's eyes. I looked directly at Lydia. I arrived 10 minutes ago. I consumed 1 glass of sparkling water. I am happy to pay for that, plus a 20% tip on the water. But I will not be accepting liability for the $4,800 balance. Please split the check. Lydia looked at the family matriarch, then back to me. She was a professional, and in the hospitality industry, they know how to read a table. She saw a woman in a business suit sitting straight and sober, and 4 people smelling of expensive liquor who looked like they were trying to run a con. Of course, Miss Lydia said. I will bring 2 separate checks immediately. As she walked away, the atmosphere at the table shifted from arrogance to hostility. My sister Tiara glared at me, her phone finally forgotten on the table. You are actually doing this, she hissed. You are going to embarrass Daddy on his anniversary. Do you know how bad this looks? It looks like accountability, Tiara, I replied, taking a sip of the water I was about to pay for. My father. Otis cleared his throat. It was a deep rumbling sound that used to terrify me when I was a child. A signal that a belt or a lecture was coming. But now, looking at him, I just saw an aging man in a suit he could not afford, trying to bully a grown woman who paid her own mortgage. You are a disgrace, Jasmine, he spat out, gripping his empty wine glass until his knuckles turned ash gray. We raised you better than this. To value family. To support your own. You think because you got that fancy job downtown, you are better than us. I am not better than you, Dad, I said. I am just solvent. There is a difference. Caleb. My brother-in-law decided to jump back into the fray. He shook his head, looking at me with that patronizing pity that made my skin crawl. This is sad, really. It shows a complete lack of class. In the circles I run in, we don't count coins. We take care of things. But if you are that broke, Jasmine, if you really cannot afford a simple dinner, just say so. We can help you out. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. Lydia returned with a small black folder in one hand and a much larger, thicker leather binder in the other. She placed the small slip of paper next to me. $12.50, she said softly. I pulled a $20 bill from my purse and placed it on the tray. Keep the change, Lydia. Thank you for your service. Thank you, miss, she said, pocketing the bill. Then, with a stiffness in her posture, she placed the large leather binder in the center of the table, right between the flower arrangement and the empty lobster platter. The balance is $4,850.25. The table went silent. The bill sat there like a ticking bomb. No one moved to touch it. My mother was looking at the tablecloth. Tiara was looking at Caleb. Caleb was looking at the ceiling. "Well," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Caleb, you just gave a lovely speech about class and circles where people don't count coins. Why don't you handle it?" Caleb stiffened. He patted his jacket pockets, his movements theatrical and exaggerated. "Ah, right. I would absolutely. But like I said, my liquidity is a bit complex right now. I have a wire transfer coming in from Dubai on Monday, and until then my accounts are frozen for security. Standard protocol for high net worth individuals." I raised an eyebrow. "Standard protocol or insufficient funds?" Caleb's face turned a blotchy red. "Watch your mouth." Otis slammed his hand on the table again. "Enough, I do not need my son-in-law to pay for my dinner, and I certainly do not need my ungrateful daughter. I am the man of this house. I will take care of it." My father reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a card with a flourish. It was black, heavy, and metallic. He slammed it down on the bill. "Put it on the onyx card," he told Lydia, puffing out his chest. "And add a 15% tip. We are not cheapskates like some people." I recognized the card immediately. It was a secured credit card marketed to people with bad credit who wanted to look rich. You put down a deposit, and that deposit becomes your limit. It was flashy, heavy, and completely useless if you didn't have the cash to back it up. Lydia took the card without a word and walked to the portable terminal at the server station just a few feet away. The seconds that followed stretched out into hours. My father sat with his arms crossed, a smug smile on his face, tapping his foot. My mother looked relieved, visibly relaxing now that the problem seemed to be solved. "See," Verna sneered at me. "Your father always handles business. You should be ashamed of yourself causing a scene for nothing." I didn't say anything. I just watched Lydia. I watched her insert the card. I watched her wait. And then I saw the slight cringe in her shoulders. The machine let out a sharp electronic beep that cut through the ambient jazz music. Lydia frowned, pulled the card out, wiped the chip on her apron, and inserted it again. Beep. My father's tapping foot stopped. Lydia walked back to the table, her expression apologetic but firm. "Sir," the card was declined. The air left the table as if someone had opened an airlock in space. "That is impossible," Otis blustered, snatching the card back. "There must be 50,000 on that card." "Run it again. Your machine is broken." "I ran it twice," Sir Lydia said, her voice cooling. "The issuer has declined the transaction." "Do you have another form of payment?" Otis fumbled in his wallet. He pulled out a blue debit card. "Try this one." Lydia took it. She walked back to the machine. The family watched her like their lives depended on it. "Beep," she returned. "Declined, sir. Insufficient funds." My mother let out a small whimper. "Otis, what is going on? You said the refinancing went through." "It did." Otis shouted, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. "The bank is making a mistake. They always flag my big purchases because they think it is fraud." He looked around the table, panic setting in. His eyes landed on Caleb. "Son, you have to cover this. I will wire you the money first thing in the morning when the bank opens. Just put it on your corporate card." Caleb froze. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a terrified twitch in his left eye. I can't, Otis," Caleb stammered. "I told you. My wallet. I think I left it in the valet stand when we parked. Or maybe I left it at home. I don't have my cards on me." "You don't have your wallet," Tiara shrieked. "You drove us here. I saw you put your license in your pocket." "I mean, I have my license," Caleb yelled back. "But I took my cards out because of the security freeze." The lies were crumbling. The facade of wealth was melting under the heat of a $4,000 bill. They sat there, four adults in expensive clothes, realizing they had absolutely no way to pay for the gluttony they had just indulged in. Lydia signaled to a security guard standing near the entrance. He took a step closer to our table. "Sir," Lydia said, her voice leaving no room for argument, "if you cannot provide a valid form of payment, I will have to involve the authorities. This is theft of services." My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Jasmine, please. You cannot let them arrest your father. Just pay it. We will pay you back." I swear, I looked at her hand on my arm. The same hand that had slapped me when I was 16 because I wanted to join the math club instead of a pageant. The same hand that had signed checks for Tiara's modeling classes while I worked at a diner. I stood up, brushing her hand off my sleeve as if it were a speck of dust. I picked up my purse. "It seems like you guys have a lot to figure out," I said. "And since Caleb is a big-shot real estate investor, I am sure he can negotiate a payment plan. Maybe they will let you wash dishes, Jasmine." My father roared, half rising from his chair. "If you walk out that door, you are dead to me." I looked at him, then at Caleb, who was frantically checking his pockets for a wallet that wasn't there, and finally at the manager. "Lydia, these people are my relatives, but I have no financial association with them. Do what you have to do." I turned my back on them. As I walked toward the revolving doors, I heard my mother start to sob. I heard Caleb trying to explain to the security guard that he knew the mayor. But for the first time in my life, I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I walked out into the cool Chicago night air, and I had never breathed oxygen that tasted so sweet. But as I hailed a cab, I knew this wasn't over. My phone was already buzzing in my pocket. The war had just begun, and the first casualty was their pride. What I didn't know was that by morning, they would try to make me the villain of the story. They were about to learn that when you come for the person who handles the risk, you better be prepared for the audit. I did not sleep like a baby that night. Babies wake up every 2 hours crying for attention. I slept like a judge who had just banged the gavel on a life sentence, knowing justice had been served. For the first time in years, the silence in my apartment wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I had turned my phone off the moment I stepped into the taxi outside the Gilded Oak, silencing the barrage of calls that had started before the revolving door even stopped spinning. I knew exactly what was happening on the other end of the line, and I refused to let their panic invade my sanctuary. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through my blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a Saturday. Usually, my Saturdays were spent running errands for my parents or helping Tiara edit her resume for the 10th time. Today, the only thing on my schedule was coffee and consequences. I sat up, stretched, and reached for my phone on the nightstand. I took a deep breath before holding the power button. The device vibrated so violently in my hand I almost dropped it. It buzzed continuously for a solid 2 minutes, a frantic heartbeat of missed calls, text messages, and voicemails. 47 missed calls, 12 from Mom, 8 from Dad, 15 from Tiara, and 12 from a number I didn't recognize, which I assumed was the precinct. I didn't call back immediately. Instead, I went to the kitchen, ground my coffee beans, and waited for the brew to finish. I needed caffeine to process the level of delusion I was about to encounter. I sat at my small kitchen island, took a sip of the dark roast, and began to play the voicemails. The first one was from 8:15 p.m., just minutes after I left. It was my mother, Verna. Her voice was a mixture of shock and command. "Jasmine, get back here right now. The manager is threatening to call the police. This isn't funny. You have made your point. Turn the cab around." The second voicemail was from 8:30 p.m. The tone had shifted to hysteria. "Jasmine, they are putting handcuffs on your father, do you hear me? They are cuffing Otis Jones like a common criminal. Caleb is trying to talk to them, but they won't listen. Bring your credit card back here immediately." The third voicemail was from 11 p.m. The background noise was different now. Echoey, industrial. The hum of fluorescent lights and the distant clanging of metal. It was Tiara, and she was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "They took my phone, Jazz. They made me squat and cough. I am wearing a sequin dress in a holding cell next to a woman who smells like gasoline. How could you do this to us? I hate you. I hate you so much. I skipped to the final voicemail time stamped at 4 a.m. It was my father. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual boom and bluster. We are out. Uncle Ray came. Do not think this is over, Jasmine. You have humiliated this family for the last time. I set the phone down. Uncle Ray. I almost laughed. Ray was my father's estranged younger brother, a man who ran a questionable auto salvage business on the South Side. My parents had spent decades looking down on Ray, banning him from holiday dinners because he was too rough, too unpolished, too working class. Yet when their facade of wealth crumbled, he was the only one with enough actual cash under his mattress to bail them out. The irony was delicious. My phone started ringing again. It was my mother. I swiped right to answer. I needed to hear this. Hello, Mother, I said, keeping my voice flat. You evil, spiteful little witch, Verna screamed. The volume was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Do you have any idea what you put us through? We spent the night in jail. Jasmine jail. Your father had to sleep sitting up because the bench was covered in filth. They took Caleb's belt and shoelaces. I took a sip of coffee. Well, if Caleb had paid the bill like a man of his status, he would still have his shoelaces. Don't you dare blame this on Caleb, she shrieked. He was a victim in this just as much as we were. He was trying to protect us. He told the police he was going to sue the department for racial profiling and wrongful detainment. He stood up for this family while you ran away like a coward. I leaned back against the counter. Mom, let's be clear. I didn't run away. I left a dinner I wasn't invited to participate in only to pay for. There is a difference. Did Uncle Ray get his money back yet? Or did you promise him a wire transfer from Dubai too? There was a scuffle on the other end of the line, the sound of the phone being snatched away. Then Caleb's voice filled my ear. It was smooth, condescending, and dripping with venom. You think you are so smart, don't you, Jasmine? Good morning to you too, Caleb, I said. How was the accommodation? 5 stars, you know exactly what you did, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. You set us up. You knew my accounts were temporarily frozen. You knew Otis and Verna were liquidating assets for the new property. You chose that moment to strike because you are jealous. Jealous? I asked, genuinely confused by his logic. Jealous of what, Caleb? The debt, the handcuffs, the mugshots. You are jealous because you are alone, he spat. You look at Tiara and me, and you see true love. You see a partnership. You look at your parents, and you see a legacy of Black excellence that you can't measure up to because you are too busy counting pennies and living in that shoebox apartment. You are a sad, bitter, lonely woman who couldn't stand seeing her younger sister happy and successful. So you tried to sabotage us. The gaslighting was masterful. He had taken a situation where he was exposed as a fraud and twisted it until he was the romantic hero and I was the villainous, envious spinster. He wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to himself. And my parents were eating it up because the alternative was admitting they had been conned. Caleb, I said, my voice hardening. The only thing I am jealous of is your audacity. It must be nice to walk through life with that level of unearned confidence. But here is a reality check. You didn't get arrested because of me. You got arrested because you ordered a $5,000 dinner with $0 in your pocket. That is called theft. You humiliated us in front of white people, my mother yelled from the background. You made us look like trash. You did that all by yourselves, I replied. Listen to me, Jasmine, Caleb said, regaining control of the conversation. You are going to fix this. You are going to transfer $10,000 to your father's account by noon today. That will cover the bail the bill Ray paid and the emotional distress you caused Tiara. If you don't, we are going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Are you blackmailing me? I asked. I am giving you a chance to redeem yourself, Caleb said, to buy your way back into this family. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Caleb, I don't want to buy my way back in. I just sold my shares. I am not sending you a dime. In fact, tell Dad he owes me $12 for the sparkling water. I hung up the phone before they could respond. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. They were not sorry. They were not embarrassed. They were angry that their ATM had malfunctioned. They were doubling down on the lie. I looked at the black screen of my phone. Caleb's threat hung in the air. We will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. I knew Tiara. I knew how she operated. She lived her life on social media where truth was irrelevant and narrative was everything. They weren't going to keep this private. They were going to take this public. I walked over to my laptop and opened it. If they wanted a war of information, they were bringing a knife to a gunfight. I was a risk assessor. My entire career was built on finding the rot beneath the surface. I pulled up a fresh browser window and typed in the name I had heard so many times but never bothered to investigate. Caleb Montgomery. It was time to see who my brother-in-law really was. But before I could even hit enter, my phone pinged with a notification from Instagram, then another from TikTok, then a text from a coworker. Have you seen this? The text read. I clicked the link. It was a video of Tiara mascara running down her cheeks, looking into the camera with big, sorrowful eyes. The caption read, "Betrayed by my own sister. The nightmare at the Gilded Oak." The smear campaign had begun, and I was the target. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my apartment as I watched the video for the 10th time. It was a masterpiece of fiction, a short film of deception that deserved an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. My sister Tiara sat cross-legged on her bed wearing an oversized hoodie that made her look small and vulnerable. Her makeup was artfully smeared just enough to suggest she had been crying for hours, but not enough to hide her contouring. The caption alone made my stomach turn. It read, "The truth about my sister, the monster in the Prada suit." I pressed play again, unable to look away from the train wreck of my own reputation. "Hey guys," Tiara whispered, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. "I didn't want to make this video. You know I am all about positivity and light. But I cannot stay silent while my family is suffering. Last night, my wealthy sister Jasmine invited our parents out for their 40th anniversary. She promised to treat them to a night they would never forget. I paused the video, my hand trembling over the trackpad. Invited them. Promised to treat them. The lies were starting within the first 10 seconds. I forced myself to press play. She ordered everything. Tiara continued, wiping a non-existent tear. The most expensive wine, the lobster, the Wagyu beef. She kept telling my dad to order more, saying he deserved it. And then when the bill came, she just laughed. She threw a $20 bill at the waiter and walked out. She left our elderly parents and my husband, who was a guest in our family, to face the police. She knows we are going through a hard time. She knows my dad just put all his savings into a new home for our family. She did it to humiliate us. She did it because she hates that we are happy and she is alone. The video cut to a clip of my mother Verna sitting at her kitchen table, looking distraught and holding a tissue to her nose. She wasn't speaking, but the image of the grieving, betrayed mother was powerful. Then it cut back to Tiara. "We spent the night in a cell," Tiara sobbed. "My husband was treated like a criminal. My dad is humiliated. And Jasmine? She won't even answer our calls. If you guys could just tag her employer and ask why they hire people who abuse their own families, maybe she will finally take accountability." I stared at the view count. 2.4 million views. It had been up for less than 12 hours. I scrolled down to the comments, and it felt like opening a door to a blast furnace. The internet had already held its trial, and I had been found guilty. One user wrote, "Imagine being that rich and letting your parents go to jail over dinner. Trash." Another commented, "I found her LinkedIn. She works at Sterling Risk Management. Everyone go leave a review." A third one said, "This is what happens when people forget where they came from. She thinks she is better than her own blood. Cancel her." I shut the laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was Sunday. The office was closed, but I knew that by Monday morning, this digital wildfire would burn down the doors of my sanctuary. They had weaponized my success against me. To the world, I wasn't the daughter who had been financially drained for a decade. I was the villainous corporate elitist who enjoyed watching her family suffer. Monday morning arrived with a sense of impending doom. I dressed in my sharpest charcoal suit armor for the battle ahead, but I couldn't stop my hands from shaking as I applied my lipstick. When I walked into the lobby of Sterling Risk Management, the atmosphere was different. Usually the receptionist Sarah greeted me with a warm smile and a comment about the weather. Today, she looked down at her computer screen, her face flushed, pretending to be intensely busy. I walked toward the elevators feeling the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes on my back. I could hear the whispers. They were faint, but they were there. Is that her? Yeah, the one from the video? I heard she let her dad get arrested. I kept my chin up, staring straight ahead at the stainless steel doors, but inside I was crumbling. My career was my identity. It was the one thing I had built that didn't belong to Otis and Verna. It was the one place where I was judged on my competence, not my compliance. And now Tiara had brought her toxic circus into my boardroom. I had barely sat down at my desk when my office phone rang. The display read Mr. Henderson. He was the senior partner. He never called directly. He always had his assistant set up a meeting. Jasmine Henderson's voice was crisp and cold. My office. Now. The walk to the corner office felt like a march to the gallows. When I entered, Henderson didn't offer me a seat. He was standing by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline, holding a tablet in his hand. Jasmine, we have a problem, he said, turning to face me. I opened my mouth to explain, to tell him that it was a personal matter, a misunderstanding, a lie. But he held up a hand to stop me. Since 9 o'clock this morning, our public relations line has received over 300 calls, he said. Our Google reviews have dropped from 4.8 stars to 2.3. We have clients emailing us asking if we employ a woman who commits elder abuse. Mr. Henderson, that video is a fabrication. I said, my voice steady, despite the fear gripping my throat. My family is upset because I refused to pay a $5,000 dinner bill that I didn't authorize. They are retaliating. I believe you, Jasmine Henderson said, and for a second, I felt a flicker of hope. You are one of my best risk assessors. You are logical. Cruelty doesn't fit your profile. He placed the tablet on his desk. The paused image of Tiara's crying face looked up at us. But here is the reality, he continued, his voice hardening. We are a risk management firm. We deal with trust. We deal with reputation. Right now, you are a reputational risk. I don't care about the truth of your family drama. I care that it is disrupting my business. I care that I have to pay a PR team to scrub our social media comments because of your sister. He leaned forward, his gray eyes locking onto mine. Fix this, Jasmine. I don't care how you do it. Pay them off. Sue them. Make a public apology. I don't care. But if the phones are still ringing about this tomorrow, I will have to let you go. We cannot afford the distraction. I walked out of his office feeling numb. I went back to my desk and sat there staring at a spreadsheet that no longer made sense. I realized then that I had underestimated them. I thought this was just about money. I thought they just wanted to guilt me into paying their debts like I always did. But this was different. This was total war. Tiara, Caleb, and my parents were willing to burn my life to the ground to save face. They knew exactly where to hit me. They knew that without my job I lost my power. Without my income I couldn't hire lawyers. Without my reputation I was just as helpless as they wanted me to be. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Caleb. Saw the video is doing numbers. Fame looks good on you, sis. Mom says if you transfer $15,000 by 5 p.m. Tiara will take the video down and post a clarification saying it was a misunderstanding. Think about your job, Jasmine. I stared at the screen. 15,000. The price had gone up. It wasn't a request anymore. It was a ransom demand. A cold calm settled over me, washing away the panic. They had made a fatal error. They thought threatening my career would make me submit. They thought fear would make me open my wallet. But they had forgotten what I did for a living. I assess risk. I find the cracks in the foundation. I find the hidden rot that destroys empires. They wanted to play dirty fine. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I knew who hated liars as much as I did. Dante, I said when he answered. Jasmine. You sound different. Everything okay? I am sending you a name. I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Caleb Montgomery. I need a full forensic background check. I want to know where he went to school, where he banked, and every lawsuit he has ever been involved in. And Dante, yeah, I need you to look into a property title. My parents' house. I have a feeling there is a debt buried there that they didn't tell me about. Consider it done, Dante said. I hung up the phone and looked at the text from Caleb one last time. I didn't reply. I didn't transfer the money. Instead, I opened a new folder on my computer and named it The Audit. If they wanted to destroy me publicly, I was going to destroy them legally. And unlike Tiara's video, my evidence wouldn't need a filter to be effective. The smear campaign had hurt, but it had also clarified everything. They were no longer my family. They were my targets. Tuesday morning arrived with the gray, relentless drizzle that often blankets Chicago in the spring. Inside my office, however, the atmosphere was sterile and dry, illuminated only by the blue light of 3 computer monitors. I had locked the door. I had forwarded my calls to voicemail. I had a job to do, but it wasn't for sterling risk management. It was for the preservation of my own sanity and the systematic dismantling of the man who had declared war on me. I sat with a headset on, waiting for the secure line to connect. On the other end was Dante, a forensic accountant and attorney I had met 5 years ago during a massive corporate embezzlement case. Dante didn't care about feelings. He didn't care about family dynamics or TikTok tears. He cared about paper trails. And he was the best bloodhound I knew. The line clicked. I have the dossier. Jasmine. Dante's voice came through deep and gravelly. I just emailed you the encrypted file. The password is your favorite steakhouse. I typed in the Gilded Oak with a grim smile. The file decompressed, spilling hundreds of pages of PDF documents onto my screen. It was the life story of Caleb Montgomery, the man who claimed to be a real estate mogul, the man who lectured me on wealth building while drinking wine he couldn't afford. Where do you want to start? Dante asked. The criminal record or the employment history? Let's start with employment, I said, clicking on the folder labeled Work History. Caleb says he is a developer. He says he manages a portfolio of high-end residential properties. Dante let out a short, sharp laugh. If by developer he means he developed a strategy to stay on the couch for 3 years, then yes, he is a genius. Jasmine, look at page 4. I scrolled down. The employment timeline was a wasteland. There were gaps of 6 months, 8 months a year. His last registered employment was 3 years ago, Dante narrated as I read. He was a junior sales associate at a used luxury car dealership in the suburbs. Not real estate. Cars. I squinted at the screen. The termination reason was redacted in the public file, but Dante had managed to pull the internal HR notes from a database breach. He wasn't laid off, I whispered, reading the text. He was terminated for cause. Sexual harassment. Correct, Dante said. He was making inappropriate advances toward female customers and sending unsolicited photos to the reception staff. He signed a non-disclosure agreement to avoid a lawsuit, which is why it didn't show up on a standard background check. But the industry knows. That is why he hasn't held a job since. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. This was the man who sat at my parents' table and preached about family values. This was the man my mother defended as a gentleman. He was a predator who had been fired from a car lot, masquerading as a titan of industry. But wait, I said, leaning closer to the screen. If he hasn't worked in 3 years, how is he funding this lifestyle? The suits, the lease on the BMW, the dinners. My sister Tiara doesn't work either. She says she is a full-time content creator, but her engagement metrics are terrible. That brings us to the financial section, Dante said. Go to page 12. It is what we in the business call a circular financing scheme, or in layman's terms, a baby Ponzi. I opened the financial spreadsheet. It was a complex web of arrows and accounts, but to my trained eye, it was as clear as a map. Caleb has opened 7 credit cards in the last 2 years, Dante explained. All of them are maxed out. But here's the kicker. He isn't the primary account holder on any of them. I zoomed in. The name on the accounts wasn't Caleb Montgomery. It was Tierra Jones. He is using my sister's credit, I said, my voice dropping. He is bleeding her dry, Dante corrected. But Tierra has no income. So how does she pay the minimums to keep the scheme floating? Look at the inflow of cash into her checking account. I traced the line back to the source. The deposits were regular. 2,000 here, 3,000 there, 5,000 just last month. The source account was labeled Otis and Verna Joint Checking. My heart stopped. He is not just using Tierra, I realized the horror setting in. He is using my parents. My parents are sending money to Tierra thinking they are supporting their daughter's career or helping with household expenses. Tierra is handing that money over to Caleb. Caleb is using it to pay off the minimum balance on one card so he can charge more on another. Then he uses that credit to buy flashy things to show my parents he is successful, which convinces them to give him more money. It is a perfect loop of stupidity, Dante said. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul, but Peter and Paul are both your parents. And the moment the cash flow from your parents stops, the whole thing collapses. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. It made perfect sense. That was why they were so desperate at the restaurant. That was why the declined card was such a catastrophe. They weren't just short on cash for one night. They were tapped out. The machine had stopped feeding them, and Caleb had no backup plan because he had no job, no skills, and no assets. Look at the real estate folder, Dante urged. This is the cherry on top. I clicked on the final folder. Caleb had been posting photos on Facebook of a luxury condo development called the Montgomery Heights. He claimed he was the lead project manager. I pulled up the city registry records that Dante had attached. The address for the Montgomery Heights corresponded to a vacant lot owned by the City of Chicago Sanitation Department. There were no permits filed, no architectural plans, no construction crews. It is a phantom project, Dante said. He takes photos in front of other people's construction sites, puts on a hard hat, and posts them. He uses those photos to convince investors, probably your parents' friends, or church members, to give him seed money. Fraud, I said. That is wire fraud, that is investment fraud, and it is federal, Dante added. If he has taken money across state lines or used the internet to solicit these funds, the FBI would have a field day with him. I looked at the picture of Caleb on the screen. He was smiling, giving a thumbs up in front of a bulldozer that didn't belong to him, wearing a suit bought with my father's retirement savings. They think I am the villain, I said softly. My mother thinks I am ruining the family because I won't support this, but she has no idea she is pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. So what is the play? Dante asked. Do we hand this over to the police now? I hesitated. If I went to the police now, my parents would hate me forever. They would say I framed him. They would say I was jealous and vindictive. They were so deep in the delusion that facts wouldn't convince them. They needed to see the collapse. They needed to feel the pain of his betrayal themselves. No, I said, not yet. Caleb is still feeling confident. He thinks he won the PR battle with that video. He thinks I am scared. I need him to feel safe. I need him to think he has won, so he invites me back in. Why? Dante asked. Because I need to see the paperwork for the house, I replied. If he has drained their checking accounts, Dante, he didn't stop there. My father has a lot of equity in that house on the lake. If Caleb has touched that equity, if he has found a way to leverage the roof over their heads, then it is not just theft, Dante finished. It is annihilation. Exactly. I need to get inside the house. I need to get access to the physical files in my father's study, and the only way they will let me in is if they think I am coming to apologize and write a check. You are going to surrender. I am going to play dead, I corrected. I am going to let the vulture come to pick at the bones, and then I am going to snap its neck. I hung up the phone and looked at the pile of evidence. The anger I felt the night before had cooled into something solid and heavy like a stone in my gut. Caleb Montgomery wasn't a businessman. He was a parasite, a tick that had burrowed into the skin of my family, growing fat on their insecurities and their desperate need for validation. My parents were guilty of pride, yes. They were guilty of neglect. But they were being eaten alive, and they were thanking the chef. I picked up my phone and opened the text thread with my mother. Her last message was a string of angry emojis and a demand for the bail money. I typed slowly. Mom, you win. The internet is destroying me. I can't lose my job. I want to make things right. Let's meet. I will bring the check. I hit send. The trap was set. But this time I wasn't the prey. I was the hunter, and I was bringing the audit to their front door. The file on Caleb Montgomery was closed, but the feeling of unease in my stomach had not dissipated. It had grown heavier, a cold stone sitting at the bottom of my gut. Dante had exposed the external rot, the lies Caleb told the world. But my job as a risk assessor taught me that when you find a pest in the guest room, you check the foundation of the entire house. I had looked at everyone else's financial health. Now, with a trembling hand, I decided to look at my own. I minimized the dossier and opened the portal to my personal credit monitoring service. For 10 years, I had worn my credit score like a badge of honor. It was usually a pristine 815. It was the numerical proof of my discipline, my sacrifice, and my independence. I typed in my password, took a sip of lukewarm coffee, and hit enter. The screen refreshed. The number that stared back at me was not 815. It was 540. I blinked, sure that I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. I refreshed the page. 540. The number was red, an angry, screaming alert that my financial identity was hemorrhaging. My breath hitched in my throat. This was impossible. I paid every bill 2 days early. I had zero debt other than my mortgage. I clicked on the tab labeled Recent Activity and Alerts. The list populated and my blood turned to ice. New account opened. Second mortgage. Home equity line of credit. Lender First National Bank of Illinois. Amount $300,000. Date opened 3 weeks ago. I stared at the screen, my mind racing to make sense of the data. A second mortgage. On the family home. 10 years ago, when my parents were facing foreclosure, I had stepped in. I co-signed the deed to save the house. I put my name on the title to guarantee the loan so they wouldn't be on the street. But the agreement was clear. They paid the mortgage, and I held the legal safety net. I never authorized a second loan. I never signed a single piece of paper allowing them to borrow against the equity. I opened the digital copy of the loan documents attached to the report. I scrolled to the bottom of the last page past the dense legal jargon about interest rates and foreclosure terms. There at the bottom were 3 signatures: Otis Jones, Verna Jones, and Jasmine Jones. I zoomed in on my name. It was a good forgery, I had to give them that. It had the same loop on the J, the same sharp slant on the S, but I knew my hand. And more importantly, I knew I had been in a conference in Seattle on the date this document was signed. I wasn't even in the state of Illinois. My mother. I recognized the subtle hesitation in the ink flow. My mother had forged my signature. She had practiced it, probably sitting at the kitchen table while drinking her morning tea, and then she had signed away $300,000 of equity that legally belonged to me. But a forgery needs a witness. A loan this size needs a notary public to verify the identity of the signers. I looked at the notary stamp next to the signatures. The notary's name was Marcus P. Reynolds. I quickly typed the name into the search bar of the dossier Dante had sent me earlier. No matches. Then I typed it into Facebook. The first result was a profile picture of a man holding a red Solo cup at a backyard barbecue. Standing next to him with his arm draped around the man's shoulder was Caleb. The caption read, "College Days with the Best Bro." The puzzle pieces slammed together with violent force. Caleb had a friend who was a notary. Caleb brought the papers to the house. My parents, desperate to fund Caleb's phantom real estate projects and maintain their image, agreed to the scheme. They forged my signature. Caleb's friend stamped it. And just like that, they drained $300,000 out of the only asset my father had left. And because I was a co-owner, I was now liable for the debt. When they inevitably defaulted, the bank wouldn't just take their house. They would come for my condo. They would come for my wages. They would destroy the life I had built to pay for the lie they were living. I picked up the phone. My fingers felt numb as I dialed Dante's number again. "Jasmine," he answered on the first ring. "You found something." "They took a second mortgage," I said, my voice sounding hollow and distant to my own ears. 300,000. My name is on the paperwork, Dante, but I wasn't there. "You need to send me that document right now," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all traces of casualness. "I am sending it," I replied, hitting the forward button. "Dante, it is my mother's handwriting. And the notary is a friend of Caleb's." There was a silence on the line as Dante opened the file. I could hear the clicking of his mouse. I could hear him breathing. "Jasmine, listen to me very carefully," Dante said finally. "This is not a family dispute anymore. This is not a civil matter. This is bank fraud. This is identity theft. This is forgery of a financial instrument. These are federal crimes." I closed my eyes. Federal crimes. My parents. The people who taught me to tie my shoes. The people who sat in the front row at my college graduation. They were criminals. "If we report this," Dante continued, his voice grim, "they are looking at prison time, mandatory minimums, Caleb for orchestrating it, the notary for facilitating it, and your parents for executing it." I looked at the red number on my screen, 540. I thought about the text message from Caleb demanding $15,000. I thought about the video Tiara posted calling me a monster while she spent the money stolen from my own credit rating. "They didn't just steal money, Dante," I whispered. "They stole my name. They stole my safety. They looked at me and decided I was nothing more than collateral damage for their vanity." "So what do you want to do?" Dante asked. "Do we go to the FB?" "Not yet," I said, opening my eyes. The cold fury was back sharper than before. If I go to the police now, they might claim I gave verbal permission. They might claim it was a misunderstanding. I need them to admit it. I need to hear them say it. "You are going to the party, aren't you?" Dante guessed. "I am going to the party," I confirmed. "And Dante, I need you to bring the papers, not the lawsuit. The other papers, the transfer of deed." "You want to take the house," he said. "It is already my house," I said, staring at the forged signature one last time. "They just don't know it yet. I am going to walk into that house with a check in my hand, and I am going to walk out with the keys. Or I am going to walk out and leave the door open for the federal marshals. It is their choice." I hung up the phone. The sadness was gone. You cannot save people who are actively trying to drown you. You can only cut the rope. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. They wanted a check. I would give them a check. But the price they were going to pay for it was everything they had left. The audit was over. The execution was about to begin. Wednesday morning arrived with the sort of aggressive sunshine that felt mocking given the storm brewing in my life. I was sitting at my kitchen island nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold when my email notification pinged. The subject line was written in all capital letters. "Urgent legal notice, intent to sue for defamation and emotional damages." I opened the email. It was from a sender named Prestige Legal Group. The body of the email was a wall of text formatted with excessive bold font and underlined sentences. It claimed to represent Mr. Caleb Montgomery in a civil suit against Miss Jasmine Jones. The accusations were laughable. It cited malicious slander, public humiliation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It claimed that my refusal to pay the dinner bill had caused Mr. Montgomery irreparable reputational harm, resulting in the loss of a multi-million-dollar development deal. Then came the demand. To avoid a public trial and a potential judgment of over $1 million, Mr. Montgomery was graciously willing to settle out of court for the sum of $50,000. This payment was to be made within 48 hours to an account that unsurprisingly belonged to the same bank where Tiara held her credit cards. I leaned closer to the screen. A real lawyer would have sent this via certified mail. A real lawyer would have cited specific statutes. A real lawyer certainly would not have misspelled the word liability as liability 3 times in the first paragraph. The address for Prestige Legal Group was a post office box in a strip mall 3 blocks from my parents' house. Caleb had not even hired a fake lawyer. He had simply downloaded a template from the internet, filled in the blanks, and hit send. It was pathetic. It was desperate. And it was the exact opening I needed. My phone rang. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times before answering, composing my voice to sound shaky and defeated. "Hello," I whispered. "Jasmine, did you get the email?" Verna asked. Her voice was not angry today. It was urgent, laced with a terrifying kind of hope. "I got it, Mom," I said. "He wants $50,000. I don't have that kind of cash just sitting around." "You have to find it, Jasmine," she insisted. "Caleb is serious. He was on the phone with his legal team all morning. They want to take everything you have. They want to garnish your wages. They want to put a lien on your condo." I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples. There was no legal team. There was just Caleb sitting in her guest room in his boxers, typing on a laptop she probably paid for. "Mom, this is crazy," I said. "You can't let him do this. I am your daughter." We tried to talk to him. Verna said, her voice softening into a tone that was almost maternal, almost comforting, which made it all the more sick. "We begged him to show mercy. And because he respects us, because he loves this family, he agreed to the settlement. He said if you pay the $50,000, he will drop the lawsuit. He will even take down the video Tiara posted. He wants peace, Jasmine. He is a good man. A good man." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. "And listen to me," Verna continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It is not just about the lawsuit. Caleb let us in on a secret. This money, he is not keeping it. He is using it to secure a zoning permit for the Montgomery Heights project. Once that permit is signed next week, the value of the land triples. He promised us, Jasmine. He promised that if we help him bridge this gap, he will pay us back double." I stared at the phone. There it was. The hook, the bait, the delusion. They were not just afraid of him. They were addicted to the dream he was selling. They truly believed that if they just fed the beast one last time, it would turn into a golden goose. They were willing to sacrifice my financial future for a lottery ticket that had already expired. "He promised to pay you back?" I asked. "Just like he promised to pay for dinner." "That was a misunderstanding." Verna snapped, her patience fraying. "Why do you always dwell on the negative? This is a business opportunity. He is letting you in on the ground floor. If you pay this settlement, not only will the lawsuit go away, but Daddy and I will forgive you. We can be a family again. We can put all this ugliness behind us. Forgiveness." She was offering me forgiveness for the crime of not being their victim. I realized then that there was no saving them from this. I could show them the police reports. I could show them the fake employment history. I could show them the forged mortgage documents. It would not matter. They were too invested. They had staked their entire identity, their home, and their pride on Caleb being the savior of the family. Admitting he was a con man would mean admitting they were fools, and my parents would rather be bankrupt than be wrong. I took a deep breath. I had to play the role they wanted. I had to be the beaten dog. "Okay, Mom," I said, letting my voice crack. "You win. I cannot fight a lawsuit. I cannot lose my job. I will pay him." "Oh, thank God," Verna exhaled. "You are making the right choice, honey. You are finally growing up. But I need to see the paperwork I added quickly. I need to make sure everything is legal. I will bring a cashier's check to the house on Friday night. We can have a family dinner. I will apologize to Caleb and I will hand over the money. Friday is perfect, Verna said, sounding giddy. I will make your favorite pot roast. And Jasmine dress nice. Caleb invited some of his investors and a few of our relatives. He wants everyone to witness the reconciliation. He wants to clear the air publicly. Of course he does, I thought. He wants an audience for his victory lap. He wants to humiliate me one last time while taking my money. I will be there, Mom, I said. 7 o'clock. I hung up the phone. A minute later, a text came through from Caleb. Glad you came to your senses. See you Friday. Don't be late. And bring the check. I looked at the text and felt a cold, sharp smile spread across my face. He thought he had won. He thought I was cowering in my office, scraping together my savings to buy his silence. He had no idea that the check I was bringing was not for $50,000. He had no idea that the people coming with me were not family friends. He was arrogant. He was sloppy. And on Friday night in front of the audience he had handpicked to witness my defeat, I was going to introduce him to the concept of a federal indictment. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the dinner bell. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at my own reflection. My eyes were clear, my posture was straight, and my resolve was harder than diamond. But that was not the face I needed them to see. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump forward. I messed up my hair just enough to look frazzled. I splashed cold water on my face and didn't towel it off completely, leaving my skin looking clammy and pale. I was about to give the performance of a lifetime, and the audience was the group of people who knew exactly how to push my buttons. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over my mother's contact. I needed to channel every ounce of fear and desperation I had felt when I was 22 and broke. I needed to sound like the daughter who still sought their approval, the little girl who was terrified of the dark. I dialed. The phone rang 4 times. They were screening me. They were making me wait, letting the anxiety build, asserting their dominance before even saying a word. Hello, my mother, Verna answered finally. Her voice was cool, distant. It was the tone she reserved for telemarketers and relatives who asked to borrow money. Mom, I said, letting my voice crack and tremble. It is Jasmine. Please don't hang up. I am listening, she said, but I could hear the satisfaction in her silence. She knew why I was calling. I got the email from Caleb's lawyer, I stammered, forcing a sob into my throat. Mom, I cannot do this. I cannot go to court. If my boss finds out I am being sued for defamation, I will lose my license. I will lose my job. I have a mortgage. I have student loans. I cannot lose everything. Verna let out a long, dramatic sigh. Well, Jasmine, you should have thought about that before you decided to humiliate us at the Gilded Oak. Actions have consequences. Caleb is very hurt. We all are. You damaged his professional reputation. I know, I said, wiping a dry eye. I was just so stressed that night. I wasn't thinking clearly. I am sorry, Mom. I am so sorry. I just want this to be over. I want to pay the settlement. There was a muffled sound on the other end of the line, like a hand being placed over the receiver. I could hear whispering. They were huddled together, probably in the living room, high-fiving each other. A moment later, the phone shuffled, and Caleb's voice came on the line. Jasmine, he said. His voice was smooth, deep, and dripping with a sickening layer of false benevolence. I assume you are calling to accept the terms of my legal counsel? I am Caleb, I whispered. I don't want to fight. You win. I will pay the $50,000. Just please drop the lawsuit. Take down the video. I just want my life back. Caleb chuckled. It was a low, arrogant sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. I knew you would come around. You know, I told your father this would happen. I told him that eventually the reality of the situation would break through that stubborn pride of yours. It is a hard lesson, Jasmine, but a necessary one. You have to learn your place in the hierarchy of this family. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I am learning, Caleb. I really am. Good, he said. Now about the payment. My lawyers advised me to accept a wire transfer, but given the urgency, I am willing to accept a cashier's check. You can bring it over on Friday. I will, I said. But Caleb, there is one small problem. There was a pause. His tone sharpened instantly. What problem? Don't play games with me, Jasmine. No games, I promised quickly, pitching my voice higher to sound panicked. It is the bank. To get $50,000 in cash on such short notice, I have to liquidate some of my long-term investment bonds. My bank is very strict about money laundering regulations. Because the amount is over 10,000, and it is going to a private individual, they need to see documentation. Documentation? Caleb asked, sounding suspicious. What kind of documentation? Proof of investment. I lied smoothly. I told the bank manager that I was investing in your real estate development project. That way I can withdraw the money without paying a penalty fee. It saves me about $4,000 in taxes. But to release the funds, the bank needs to see the prospectus. They need to see the project plans, the land survey, and the projected yield. Just standard paperwork, Caleb. You know the kind of stuff you show your big investors? I held my breath. This was the pivot point. If he refused, I would have to find another way in. But I was betting on two things: his greed and his desperate need to prove he was a legitimate businessman. Caleb hesitated. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. He didn't have real paperwork because the project didn't exist. But he had fake paperwork. He had the brochures he made on Photoshop. He had the spreadsheets he used to trick my parents. I don't usually share proprietary information with entry-level investors, he said slowly. That data is sensitive. Please, Caleb, I begged. It is just for the bank. They just need to scan it for their file. If I don't show them something, they will put a hold on the funds for 30 days. I want to pay you on Friday. I want to fix this now. There was another silence. Then he let out a sigh of mock exasperation. Fine, he said. You are lucky I am a professional. I have the entire portfolio here in my home office. The blueprints, the environmental impact study, the financial projections. It is top-tier stuff. Honestly, it might be good for you to see it. Maybe you will finally understand the level I operate at. Thank you, Caleb, I said, exhaling. You are saving my life. You know Jasmine, he said, and his voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. I felt my skin crawl as he prepared to deliver his final insult. It is funny. You went to college. You have the corporate job. You think you are so independent. But in the end, who are you calling to bail you out? Who is holding the keys? You are Caleb, I said deadpan. Exactly, he said. See, this is what I have been trying to tell your sister. Some people are built to lead, and some are built to follow. And let's be honest, sweetheart. Black women like you, no matter how hard you work, you always end up needing a white man to show you the way, to guide you to the right decision. It is just nature. The rage that exploded in my chest was white-hot, blinding, and absolute. It took every ounce of my self-control not to scream into the phone. He had just reduced my entire existence, my struggle, and my heritage to a racist trope. He believed it. He truly believed that his mediocrity was superior to my excellence simply because of his gender and the color of his skin. You are right, Caleb, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. You have certainly shown me the way. I see everything very clearly now. Good, he said, oblivious to the double meaning. Friday. 7 p.m. Don't be late, and Jasmine dress. Like you respect the occasion. We are celebrating the future of the Jones family. He hung up without saying goodbye. I lowered the phone from my ear and stared at my reflection in the mirror again. The frazzled, scared woman was gone. In her place was a predator. He had taken the bait. He was going to bring the fake papers. He was going to bring the evidence of his fraud right to the dinner table. He thought he was bringing them to show off, to prove his dominance. He didn't realize he was bringing me the murder weapon. I walked out of the bathroom and picked up my laptop. I typed a quick email to Dante. Subject: It is a go. Body: He is bringing the fake portfolio. He admitted he has the files. Have the papers ready. I will get the confession. You bring the handcuffs. I hit send. That comment about needing a white man to lead me, I was going to make him eat those words. I was going to make him choke on them. He wanted to lead, fine. I would let him lead the way right into a federal indictment. I went to my closet and pushed aside the gray suits and the sensible blouses. I reached for the back where I kept the clothes I rarely wore. I pulled out a dress. It was black. It was sharp. It looked like something you would wear to a funeral or perhaps an execution. Friday night wasn't going to be a reconciliation. It was going to be a slaughter. And for the first time in a week, I was looking forward to dinner. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan as I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in. From the outside, the two-story colonial looked exactly the same as it always had. The manicured hedges were sharp, the porch light cast a warm, inviting glow, and the BMW in the driveway, leased in my father's name, but driven by Caleb, shone under the street lamps. To the neighbors, this was the residence of Otis and Verna Jones, a pillar of the community, a symbol of Black excellence and stability. But to me, as I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, it was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. It was a hollow shell gutted of its equity by a forged signature and $300,000 of debt that now hung around my neck like a noose. I checked my purse one last time. Beside the cashier's check that was supposed to buy my freedom, there were 3 small black devices. They were high-definition, wide-angle miniature cameras with audio recording capabilities, the kind usually used by private investigators to catch cheating spouses. Tonight, they would catch a cheating family. I took a deep breath, plastered a look of contrition on my face, and stepped out of the car. The air smelled of charcoal and rain. Before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open. My mother, Verna, stood there. She was wearing a gold sequined dress that was far too formal for a family dinner, her hair piled high on her head. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She stepped back to let me in, checking her watch. "You are 10 minutes early," she said, her voice clipped. "Good. We have a lot to do. If we are going to convince the family that you are truly sorry, the presentation has to be perfect." I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and expensive candles, a scent designed to mask the rot beneath the floorboards. "I am here to help Mom," I said, keeping my head lowered. "Just tell me what you need." Verna smoothed her dress, looking me up and down with critical eyes. She frowned at my black dress. "It is a bit somber, isn't it? But I suppose it fits the mood. You are here to atone after all. Now listen to me. I invited Aunt Sarah, Uncle Ray, and the cousins. About 20 people. They are all expecting a feast. Since you caused this rift, it is only right that you serve them. I want you in the kitchen. I want you to make your jambalaya, your collard greens, and that peach cobbler Caleb likes so much." She paused, waiting for me to argue. Waiting for the old Jasmine to point out that I was a guest, that I had a full-time job, that I shouldn't be treating my own apology dinner like a catering gig. I nodded slowly. "Of course, Mom. Whatever you need. I want to make sure everyone is happy tonight, especially Caleb." Verna's eyes widened, slightly surprised by my submission. She smiled, a thin, triumphant curing of her lips. "Good. I knew you would see reason. The kitchen is yours. Don't burn anything." She turned on her heel and marched into the living room to adjust the floral arrangements. I walked into the kitchen, the room where I had learned to cook, the room where I used to do my homework while my mother ignored me. It was pristine. The counters were empty. She hadn't prepped a single thing. She expected me to do it all in 2 hours. I opened the pantry door, grabbing a bag of rice and some onions. I made a show of banging pots and pans, running the water in the sink to create a wall of noise. Then I slipped my shoes off. I wasn't here to cook. I was here to bug the room. I tiptoed out of the kitchen service entrance and moved silently down the hallway toward the dining room. I could hear my mother in the living room on the phone bragging to someone about how her daughter had finally come to her senses. I slipped into the formal dining room. The table was set for 20. Fine china, crystal glasses, the works. It looked like a banquet for royalty. At the head of the table sat my father's large armchair. This was where Caleb would sit tonight. My father had ceded the head of the table to him months ago, a symbolic surrender of power that made my stomach turn. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the first device. I knelt down and attached it to the underside of the centerpiece, a large vase of hydrangeas. The camera lens peered out through the leaves, perfectly positioned to capture the face of anyone sitting at the head of the table. It would capture Caleb. I moved quickly to the sideboard where the drinks were set up. I placed the second device behind a row of liquor bottles. This one was audio only, designed to pick up the whispers and side conversations that happened when glasses were being refilled. Then I took a risk. I moved past the dining room to my father's study. The door was ajar. This was the room where the fake business happened. This was where Caleb printed his fake contracts. I slipped inside. The desk was messy, covered in papers. I didn't have time to read them all, but I didn't need to. I needed to catch them in the act of fraud. I placed the third camera on the top shelf of the bookcase, wedged between encyclopedias. It had a clear view of the entire room. If Caleb brought me in here to sign anything, or if he came in here to brag to my father about swindling me, I would have it in 4K resolution. Jasmine. My mother's voice rang out from the kitchen hallway. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I am in the bathroom, Mom," I called out, flushing the toilet in the powder room next to the study to cover my tracks. I walked out, drying my dry hands on my dress. Verna was standing at the end of the hall, looking suspicious. "We don't have time for breaks," she scolded. "The guests will be here in 30 minutes. The rice better be on the stove." "It is boiling now," I lied smoothly, walking past her back into the kitchen. For the next half hour, I performed a miracle. I chopped, I stirred, I seasoned. I moved with the efficiency of a machine. I wasn't cooking with love, I was cooking with rage. Every chop of the knife was a release of the anger I had held back for years. I made the jambalaya spicy just the way Caleb hated it, but pretended it was a mistake. I made the greens salty. I wanted them to choke on this meal, figuratively, if not literally. At 6:45, the doorbell rang. The vultures had arrived. I stayed in the kitchen, watching through the crack in the swinging door. Uncle Ray came in first, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was too tight. Then Aunt Sarah, who immediately started criticizing the dust on the baseboards. Then the cousins, loud and boisterous, asking where the free drinks were. My father, Otis, came down the stairs. He looked tired. The stress of the debt was etching lines into his face that even his pride couldn't hide. But when he saw the guests, he put on his mask. He laughed. He shook hands. He played the part of the successful patriarch. And then, at 7 o'clock on the dot, the front door opened and Caleb walked in with Tiara on his arm. The room went silent, then erupted into applause. My family, my own flesh and blood, were clapping for the man who was robbing them blind. Caleb soaked it in. He was wearing a white suit, looking like a televangelist, ready to preach the gospel of prosperity. He waved, shaking hands, kissing babies. He looked like he owned the place. And in his mind, he did. He was carrying a leather briefcase. My eyes locked onto that briefcase. That was it. The fake portfolio. The evidence I had requested. He had brought the noose just as I had asked. I adjusted my apron and walked out of the kitchen. The room quieted down when they saw me. The applause died. The smiles faded. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and judgment. To them, I was the prodigal daughter returning in shame. I was the failure who had to be bailed out by the white savior in the white suit. Caleb saw me. He smiled a wide, shark-like grin. "Jasmine," he boomed, spreading his arms. "The chef has emerged. I hope you made enough for everyone. We have a lot of celebrating to do." I walked toward him, keeping my head down, playing the role. I smelled the cheap cologne he wore to mask the scent of desperation. Dinner is served, Caleb, I said softly. And I made it special, just for you. He laughed, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. That is what I like to hear. Come on, everyone, let's eat. And then we have some business to attend to. As they moved toward the dining room, toward the cameras and microphones I had planted, I allowed myself a single genuine smile. They thought they were walking into a victory feast. They didn't know they were walking into an interrogation room. The food was hot, the cameras were rolling, and I was ready to serve the main course. Justice. The dinner was a spectacle of gluttony and ignorance. I sat at the far end of the table, picking at a small portion of the greens I had cooked, watching my family devour the meal, as if they had not eaten in days. My mother Verna was holding court near the center, laughing too loudly at every joke Caleb made, her gold sequins catching the light of the chandelier. She looked triumphant. In her mind, she had won. She had broken her stubborn daughter, secured the funding for her golden boy, and kept the family reputation intact. She had no idea that beneath the centerpiece of white hydrangeas, a tiny camera lens was recording every bite she took and every lie she swallowed. Caleb sat at the head of the table in my father's chair, the king of his own imaginary kingdom. He ate with his mouth open, talking while chewing, a habit that usually drove my mother crazy, but tonight she gazed at him with adoration. He was wearing the white suit that looked expensive from a distance, but cheap up close, the stitching fraying slightly at the cuffs. He poured wine for Uncle Ray, clapping him on the back, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch. So Jasmine, Uncle Ray boomed, wiping gravy from his chin. Your mom tells us you finally saw the light, decided to invest in the future instead of hoarding your pennies? I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. That is right, Uncle Ray. Caleb explained the vision to me. It was too good to pass up. Caleb pointed his fork at me. That is the thing about this family. We might have our differences, but when it comes to business, we know a winner when we see one. Jasmine just needed a little guidance to understand the complexity of the market. I took a sip of water to wash down the bile rising in my throat. I watched as he finished his plate and pushed it away. He dabbed his mouth with a linen napkin, stood up and buttoned his jacket. The room fell silent. It was time. The performance was about to begin. Caleb walked over to the sideboard and picked up his leather briefcase. He placed it on the table right next to the remnants of the peach cobbler. He clicked the latches open with a theatrical snap. The guests leaned in, their eyes wide. To them, a briefcase meant business. It meant money. It meant legitimacy. He pulled out a stack of glossy brochures. I could tell immediately they were printed at the local copy shop. The colors were slightly off, and the paperweight was flimsy. But he handed them out like they were sacred texts. Ladies and gentlemen, Caleb began, his voice dropping into a rehearsed baritone. What you are holding in your hands is not just paper. It is a ticket to freedom. It is the blueprint for Montgomery Heights. He paced around the table, gesturing wildly. We are not just building condos, he preached. We are building a legacy. We are taking a vacant lot that the city gave up on, and we are turning it into a sanctuary for Black excellence. Luxury living, gated community, smart homes, and the returns. We are conservatively estimating a 200% return on investment within the first 18 months. 200%. Aunt Sarah gasped. That is better than the lottery. Exactly, Caleb said, pointing a finger at her. Because the lottery is luck. Montgomery Heights is logic. I have spent the last 3 years analyzing the zoning laws, negotiating with contractors, and securing the supply chain. The only thing missing was the final capital injection to break ground. And thanks to Jasmine, we are closing that gap tonight. He looked at me, expecting me to beam with pride. I nodded slowly, playing the part of the converted skeptic. It sounds incredible, Caleb, I said, making sure my voice was loud enough for the microphone behind the liquor bottles to pick up. 200% is a massive number. Even Wall Street hedge funds don't promise that. Caleb chuckled, a sound that was meant to be condescending. Wall Street is old money, Jasmine. They play by old rules. I am disrupting the market. I have found loopholes in the tax code and efficiencies in construction that they are too bloated to see. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand, widening my eyes in feigned fascination. I love that. Disrupting the market. That is so smart. But I do have a few questions. Since I am handing over $50,000 tonight, I just want to understand the mechanics. Ask away, Caleb said, checking his watch, as if he had somewhere better to be. But keep it simple. I don't want to bore everyone with the technical jargon. I reached for one of the brochures and flipped to the back page where a meaningless pie chart was displayed. Well, I was looking at the funding structure, I said. You mentioned earlier that Mom and Dad are lead investors. My father, Otis, puffed out his chest. That is right. We believe in Caleb. We put our money where our mouth is. Right, I continued, turning my gaze to my father. And Mom mentioned that to make that investment, you guys had to leverage some assets, specifically the equity in this house. The room got a little quieter. Money talk was fine when it was about profits, but debt was a taboo subject. My mother shifted in her seat, shooting me a warning look. Jasmine, we don't need to discuss personal finances in front of company, Verna hissed. I am not trying to be difficult, Mom, I said, raising my hands in surrender. I am just trying to learn. Caleb is the expert here. I want to know how he handles that kind of capital. I turned back to Caleb. So Caleb, just so I am clear, the $300,000 that Mom and Dad secured through the second mortgage on this house, that money was transferred to the project account, right? To pay for the land. Caleb stiffened slightly. He didn't expect me to know the exact number, but his arrogance overrode his caution. He saw an opportunity to look like a financial wizard. That is correct, Jasmine. 300,000. It was a bold move, but fortune favors the bold. And where is that money now? I asked innocently. Because I ran a title search on the vacant lot you mentioned, the one at the sanitation department address. The city records show it is still owned by the municipality. There hasn't been a sale recorded. The air in the room changed. It wasn't hostile yet, just confused. Uncle Ray frowned, looking from me to Caleb. Caleb laughed, but it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. He adjusted his tie. City records are slow, Jasmine. Bureaucracy. They take months to update. You know that. Okay, I said. But if the land isn't purchased yet, where is the $300,000? Is it sitting in a corporate escrow account? Because that would be the standard practice for investor protection. Caleb rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed that I was drilling down. Escrow is for amateurs, he scoffed. Escrow accounts have fees. They have restrictions. I don't let banks tell me how to move my money. Then where is it? I pressed, my voice hardening just a fraction. If it is not in land and it is not in escrow, where did my parents' retirement money go? Caleb slammed his hand on the table. Why are you grilling me? I told you I am handling it. I am just asking for the location of the funds, Caleb, I said, keeping my composure while he lost his. It is a simple question. Did you spend it? No, he shouted. I didn't spend it. I moved it. Moved it where I asked. I moved it into a blind trust, he yelled, his face turning red. I transferred the funds into a private holding trust under my name to protect it from tax liability. If we keep it in a business account, the IRS takes a cut before we even break ground. By moving it to a personal trust, I can shelter the assets until construction starts. It is called tax efficiency, Jasmine. Maybe they don't teach you that in your little risk assessment job. Gotcha. The word echoed in my mind. He had just admitted in front of 20 witnesses and 3 recording devices that he had taken investment funds solicited for a real estate project and moved them into a personal account under his own name. That was not tax efficiency, that was commingling of funds. That was embezzlement. That was wire fraud. I looked at my father. He didn't understand what had just happened. He was nodding along, thinking Caleb was a genius for dodging the IRS. Wow, I said, leaning back in my chair. A blind trust. That is very advanced, Caleb, so the money is safe. Safe as houses. Caleb smirked, regaining his composure. And you are the only one with access to this trust. I asked, baiting him one last time. Exclusively, he bragged. Total control. That is how a CEO operates. I smiled. A genuine, terrifying smile. Thank you, Caleb, I said. That clears up everything. I think I have heard enough. Enough? Caleb asked, raising an eyebrow. Enough to write the check. Enough to close the file, I corrected. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. The room fell silent again. Caleb looked at me, confusion flickering in his eyes. He sensed a shift in the energy, but he couldn't quite place it. He was expecting submission. He was expecting a checkbook. Instead, I reached into my purse. But I didn't pull out a check. I pulled out a small remote control. What is that? Verna asked, her voice trembling. Jasmine, what are you doing? I am showing you the presentation you actually need to see, I said. I pointed the remote at the blank white wall behind Caleb. I had hidden a portable projector in the flower arrangement on the sideboard earlier, synced to my phone. I pressed the power button. A beam of light cut through the dim room, splashing a bright high-definition image onto the wall directly above Caleb's head. It wasn't a pie chart. It wasn't a rendering of a luxury condo. It was a bank statement. Specifically, the bank statement for the personal account Caleb had just admitted to controlling. The room gasped. Caleb turned around, his eyes bulging as he saw his own financial secrets projected 10 feet tall. Hey! He shouted, jumping up. What the hell is this? Turn that off! Sit down, Caleb, I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a whip. The image on the wall showed a deposit of $300,000 3 weeks ago. And below it, a list of transactions that went on for pages. Porsche of Chicago, down payment, DraftKings Sportsbook, Gucci, Rolex, the Sapphire Gentlemen's Club. There was no land purchase, there was no zoning permit, there was no trust fund. There was just a man spending his in-laws' life savings on cars, gambling, and strippers. I looked at my father. His face had turned a sickly shade of gray. He was staring at the wall, reading the line items, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. You said you moved it to a trust, I said to Caleb, my voice calm and deadly. Is DraftKings the name of the trust, Caleb? Is the strip club a tax shelter? Caleb lunged for the projector, knocking over a chair. That is fake, she doctored it. She is lying. I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. My brother-in-law, the man who had bullied me, shamed me, and threatened me, was now sweating through his cheap suit, looking like a trapped rat. It is not fake, Caleb, I said. And neither is the FBI agent sitting in a car down the street listening to the recording of you admitting to federal tax evasion and wire fraud. The room erupted into chaos. But for me, the world went silent. The pitch was over. The verdict was in. And the executioner had arrived. The beam of the projector cut through the dim dining room like a searchlight in a prison yard. The image on the wall was crisp, high definition, and undeniable. It was not the architectural rendering of a gated community. It was a PDF document with the seal of the Illinois Department of Labor, specifically a termination notice for one Caleb Montgomery. I stood by the sideboard, the remote control in my hand, feeling heavier than a judge's gavel. The room was frozen. A fork halfway to Aunt Sarah's mouth hovered in midair. My mother's hand clutched the tablecloth so tightly her knuckles were white. Caleb was the only one moving, his eyes darting from the screen to me, his chest heaving with the panic of a trapped animal. I clicked the button again. The image changed. This is not a business plan, Caleb, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. This is your employment history. Or rather, your lack of one. The screen displayed a timeline. It showed 3 years of unemployment. It showed the lawsuit filed by the car dealership for sexual harassment. It showed the non-disclosure agreement he had signed to stay out of jail. My father Otis squinted at the wall. Termination for cause, he read aloud, the words tasting foreign in his mouth. Sexual misconduct. That is a lie. Caleb screamed, lunging toward the wall as if he could physically block the truth with his body. She photoshopped that. She is trying to frame me because she is jealous. I didn't flinch. I just clicked the remote again. Let's talk about the money, Dad, I said, turning to my father. You mortgaged this house. You signed away $300,000 of equity. You gave it to this man because he told you it was going into a blind trust for land development. The image on the wall shifted to a bank statement. It was the Chase private client account Caleb had bragged about earlier. But I had highlighted the outgoing transactions in bright yellow. I want you to look at the dates, I instructed the room. Look at the date the loan money hit his account. April 15th. Now look at April 16th. A collective gasp went through the room as they read the line item. Porsche Gold Coast. Down payment, $80,000. My mother let out a small strangled sound. That is his company car, she whispered, trying to cling to the delusion. He needs it for client meetings. I clicked the remote. April 18th. The Sapphire Gentlemen's Club. $5,000. April 20th. DraftKings Sportsbook. $12,000. April 22nd. The Sapphire Gentlemen's Club again. $7,000. The list went on. It scrolled down the wall like the credits of a horror movie. Gucci. Louis Vuitton. A weekend stay at the Four Seasons in downtown Chicago, a hotel located only 10 miles from where he lived with my sister. Tiara stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking. She looked at the screen, then at her husband. You told me you were at a zoning conference that weekend, she said, her voice trembling. You said you were fighting the city council for permits. I was, Caleb shouted, sweat pouring down his face now. That is client entertainment. You have to spend money to make money. These are business expenses. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a Venmo transaction history. It showed a recurring payment of $2,000 a week to a user named Crystal. The memo line for each payment was a single heart emoji. Who is Crystal? Tiara asked. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I think we all know who Crystal is, I said softly. She is likely the reason you didn't get a birthday present this year, Tiara. Tiara let out a scream that didn't sound human. She grabbed a wine glass and hurled it at Caleb. It shattered against his shoulder, spraying red wine all over his white suit. He flinched, backing away until he hit the wall right in the middle of the projection of his own greed. But I wasn't done. The financial ruin was bad. The infidelity was painful. But I needed to destroy the one thing that still gave him power over my parents. I needed to destroy the myth of his respect for them. I have one last slide, I announced. Caleb looked at me, his eyes pleading. Jasmine, don't. Please. We can work this out. I will pay it back. I swear. It is too late for negotiations, Caleb. I pressed the button. The screen filled with screenshots of text messages. They were conversations between Caleb and Marcus, the notary who had helped him forge the loan documents. I read the first text aloud, my voice steady and cold. Sending the docs now. The old man didn't even read them. He just wants to feel important. These people are so desperate for a white savior, it is pathetic. My father made a sound like he had been punched in the gut. He slumped in his chair, his hand flying to his chest. I read the next one. Just got the wire. 300 large. Going to bleed this dry, and then ghost. The wife is annoying as hell, but she signs whatever I put in front of her. Easy mark. And the final text dated just 2 days ago, right after I had agreed to pay the settlement. The sister is finally caving. Stupid bitch is giving me another 50 grand. I'm going to take this money and book a flight to Cabo. Might not come back. Let them deal with the foreclosure. LOL. The LOL at the end of the text seemed to hang in the air, mocking every sacrifice my parents had ever made. I turned off the projector. The room plunged back into semi-darkness illuminated only by the chandelier. Caleb stood against the wall, the red wine dripping down his white suit looking like blood. He wasn't the confident businessman anymore. He wasn't the leader. He was exposed as exactly what he was. A predator who had seen a proud, insecure family and eaten them alive. My father stood up slowly. He looked older than I had ever seen him. He walked around the table, his steps heavy. He stopped in front of Caleb. "You called me an easy mark?" Otis asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You called my wife an idiot." Caleb held up his hands. "Otis, listen. That is out of context. That is just locker room talk. I love this family. I was building a legacy for us." My father didn't scream. He didn't hit him. He just spit in Caleb's face. "Get out of my house," Otis said. But Caleb didn't move toward the door. He straightened his jacket, a sudden desperate sneer appearing on his face. "I can't leave Otis. I live here. And technically, since I hold the trust that holds the funds that pay the mortgage, this is my house. You can't kick me out. I own you." He looked at me, a wild, manic look in his eyes. "You think you won, Jasmine? You just blew up your parents' life. They are broke. The money is gone. I spent it. You can't get blood from a stone." I smiled. It was the smile of someone who had already dug the grave. "You are right, Caleb. I can't get the money back from you. But I didn't come here to get a refund. I came here to get a conviction." I pulled out my phone and held it up. The screen showed a call in progress. The timer was at 45 minutes. "Who are you talking to?" Caleb asked, his voice wavering. "I am not talking to anyone," I said, "but the Federal Bureau of Investigation is listening. And so is the Cook County Fraud Division." As if on cue, the red and blue lights flashed through the front window, painting the dining room in the colors of justice. A siren wailed, cutting through the silence of the suburb. Caleb ran to the window. He saw the cruisers blocking the driveway. He saw the officers stepping out, guns drawn. He turned back to me, his face draining of all color. "You set me up," he whispered. "No, Caleb," I said, picking up my purse. "I just audited you. And you failed." The projector hummed into silence, but the image of that bank statement seemed to be burned onto the retina of every person in the dining room. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the suffocating, heavy silence of a building explicitly collapsing in slow motion before the dust settles. I stood by the wall, the remote still in my hand, watching the demolition I had orchestrated finally take down the main pillars of the Jones family. Tiara was the first to break the paralysis. For years, my sister had lived in a world of filters and curated captions. She believed in the fairy tale because she had built her entire identity around being the princess to Caleb's prince. But seeing those Venmo transactions, seeing the heart emojis sent to a woman named Crystal, shattered the lens through which she viewed her life. It wasn't the theft of the money that broke her. It was the theft of her adoration. She let out a sound that started as a whimper and escalated into a feral scream. She lunged across the table, knocking over the crystal wine glasses and the centerpiece I had hidden the camera in. She didn't care about the mess. She clawed at Caleb's chest, her perfectly manicured nails tearing into the fabric of his white suit. "You swore on your mother's grave," she shrieked, her voice raw and terrifying. "You told me you were in meetings. You told me you were building our future. You were with her. You bought her a bag with my dad's money." Caleb stumbled back, trying to push her away, but his arrogance was gone, replaced by a frantic, sweaty desperation. "Get off me, Tiara. You are crazy. It is not what it looks like. It is exactly what it looks like." Tiara sobbed, striking him across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room, sharp and final. "I stood by you when Jasmine left. I defended you. I let you use my credit cards. I let you ruin my credit score because I thought you were a genius. And you were just a cheater. You are nothing." While Tiara was mourning her marriage, my father was mourning his life. Otis Jones had spent 40 years building his reputation. He wore his pride like armor. He had looked down on people like Uncle Ray for working manual labor. He had lectured me about loyalty and legacy. Now he slumped into his chair, clutching his chest with a hand that shook violently. His eyes were wide and unfocused, staring at the blank wall where the evidence of his ruin had just been displayed. $300,000, Otis whispered. The words came out wheezing, as if the air had been sucked out of his lungs. My house. You took the house. He looked up at Caleb, his eyes filling with tears of pure devastation. I trusted you, son. I signed those papers. I didn't even read them because you said we were partners. You said I was the patriarch. Caleb shoved Tiara off him, sending her stumbling back into the sideboard. He straightened his jacket, looking at my father with pure contempt. The mask of the dutiful son-in-law had fully slipped off, revealing the ugly, sneering face beneath. Oh, shut up, Otis, Caleb spat. Don't act like you are an innocent victim here. You didn't read the papers because you are lazy. You didn't read them because you were too busy fantasizing about being a real estate tycoon. You wanted the easy money. You wanted the glory without the work. I just gave you what you wanted. I gave you a dream. It is not my fault you were stupid enough to buy it. The insult hit my mother like a physical blow. Verna, who had spent the entire evening preening and boasting, who had forced me to cook this meal to serve her delusions, finally snapped. She rushed forward, her gold-sequined dress shimmering as she raised her hand to strike him. "How dare you!" she screamed. "We welcomed you into this home. We treated you better than our own daughter. You are a thief. You are a devil." She swung her hand, aiming for his face, but Caleb was faster. He was younger, stronger, and fueled by the adrenaline of a cornered animal. He caught her wrist in midair and shoved her backward with violent force. My mother stumbled, her high heels twisting on the hardwood floor. She fell hard, crashing into the chair I had vacated. The room gasped. Uncle Ray stood up, knocking his chair over, his fists clenched. "Don't you touch me, you old hag," Caleb snarled at my mother, who was lying on the floor, too shocked to move. "You are the worst of them all, Verna. You knew. Deep down you knew I didn't have the capital. But you liked the image. You liked telling your church friends that your son-in-law was a developer. You loved the lie more than you loved your own daughter. You helped me steal from Jasmine. You held the pen while I forged the signature. You are just as guilty as I am. You are just greedy." I watched from the sidelines, feeling a cold detachment. Caleb was right. His cruelty was despicable, but his assessment was accurate. They had been co-conspirators in their own destruction. They had been so hungry for status that they had invited the wolf to dinner and offered him their throats. The room was descending into absolute chaos. Aunt Sarah was helping my mother up, shouting for someone to call an ambulance for Otis, who was now gasping for air, his face turning an alarming shade of gray. The cousins were shouting at Caleb, forming a wall between him and the rest of the family. Caleb looked around, his eyes wild. He realized the walls were closing in. He realized that the sirens outside were not going away. They were getting louder. The red and blue lights were now pulsing rhythmically against the dining room curtains, casting long dancing shadows across the scene of the crime. "I have to go," Caleb muttered, panic finally taking over completely. He grabbed the leather briefcase from the table, the one filled with fake brochures and lies. He turned toward the back door, the one that led through the kitchen and out to the alley. He thought he could run. He thought he could slip away into the night and leave the wreckage behind for us to clean up. I stepped forward, blocking his path to the kitchen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't raise my hands. I just stood there, staring him down with the icy calm of a woman who had calculated every single variable. "Get out of my way, Jasmine," Caleb hissed, stepping closer. "I will hurt you. I have nothing to lose." "You have everything to lose, Caleb," I said. "And you have already lost it." He raised his hand, balling it into a fist, preparing to strike me, just as he had shoved my mother. "Hey!" Uncle Ray shouted, lunging forward. But before Ray could reach him, the front door of the house burst open with a resounding crash. The heavy oak door slammed against the wall, splintering the frame. "Federal agents! Everybody stay where you are!" The booming voice filled the house, freezing everyone in place. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Men in windbreakers with yellow lettering swarmed into the dining room, their weapons drawn but lowered. Caleb froze his fist, still raised in the air halfway to my face. He looked at the agents, then back at me. The realization washed over him. This wasn't a civil dispute. This wasn't a family argument. This was the end of the line. I looked at him one last time, my eyes locking with his. "I told you, Caleb," I whispered loud enough for only him to hear. "I don't need a white man to lead me. But it looks like you are going to need a lawyer to save you." He dropped his hand. His shoulders slumped. The briefcase fell from his fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud, spilling the glossy brochures of Montgomery Heights across the floor like a deck of cards. As the agents moved in to cuff him, I looked at my parents. My father was clutching his chest, weeping silently. My mother was huddled on the floor, her dress ruined, her face buried in her hands. Tiara was staring at the spilled brochures, her life in ruins. The illusion was shattered. The glass house had been pelted with stones, and now the cold wind of reality was blowing through the cracks. They were broken. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to fix them. I just watched. The heavy oak door of my childhood home did not just open, it was breached with a force that shook the family portraits on the walls. The sound of heavy boots thundering against the hardwood floor drowned out Caleb's pathetic attempts to bargain. Uniformed officers swarmed the dining room, their movements precise and terrifying. Federal agents' hands where we can see them. Caleb dropped his hands instantly, looking like a child caught stealing candy, except the candy was $300,000 of stolen equity. Two officers moved in on him, spinning him around and slamming him against the very wall where I had projected his crimes moments ago. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest noise in the room. "You have the right to remain silent," an officer recited, his voice monotone. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I watched from the corner of the room, my arms crossed. Beside me, the front door opened again and Dante walked in. He wasn't wearing a windbreaker or carrying a gun. He was carrying a sleek black portfolio and wearing the calm expression of a man who had already won the case. He walked over to me, nodding once at the chaos before handing me a thick stack of documents. "It is done," Dante said softly. "The forensic team has already secured the servers. We have the wire transfers, the fake trust documents, and the notary's confession. It is a slam dunk, Jasmine." Caleb was dragged past us, kicking and screaming. "Otis Verna. Help me," Caleb shrieked, his face twisted in fear. Tell them you authorized it. Tell them we are partners." My father Otis stood by the table, clutching his chest, his face the color of ash. My mother was sobbing on the floor, holding onto the leg of a chair. They looked at Caleb not with love, but with the horror of people watching their life raft sink. The lead agent stopped in front of my parents. He looked at them with cold, professional detachment. "Mr. and Mrs. Jones?" he asked. "Yes," my father whispered. "We have a warrant for the arrest of Caleb Montgomery for wire fraud, money laundering, and grand larceny. However, during our investigation, we uncovered documents related to a second mortgage taken out on this property." My mother looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "We didn't know, officer. He tricked us. We are victims." The agent didn't blink. "That may be true regarding the destination of the funds, Mrs. Jones. But we have a sworn affidavit from the notary, Marcus Reynolds. He states that you and your husband knowingly forged the signature of the co-owner Jasmine Jones on federal loan documents." The room went deadly silent. My mother's jaw dropped. "You were not just tricked," the agent continued. "You participated in bank fraud. Forging a signature on a federally backed loan is a felony punishable by up to 30 years in prison." My father's knees gave out. He collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Am I going to jail?" he sobbed. The agent looked at me. "It depends on the co-owner," he said. "It depends on whether Ms. Jones wants to press charges for the forgery." All eyes turned to me. My parents looked at me as if they were seeing me for the first time. They weren't looking at the daughter they ignored. They were looking at the judge, jury, and executioner. Jasmine, my mother wailed, crawling across the floor toward me. Baby, please. We are your parents. We made a mistake. We were desperate. Don't let them take us away. I looked down at her. I remembered the years of neglect. I remembered the dinner at the Gilded Oak. I remembered her telling me to apologize to Caleb just 2 days ago. I turned to Dante. Give me the papers. Dante opened his portfolio and pulled out a legal document. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a quitclaim deed. I knelt down so I was eye level with my mother. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I spoke with the terrifying calm of someone who holds all the cards. I will not press charges, Mom. I will not send you to prison to die. Oh, thank God, she wept, reaching for my hand. Thank you, Jasmine. I knew you were a good girl. But I continued pulling my hand away. There is a condition. I placed the document on the floor in front of her. You and Dad are going to sign this right now. This is a deed transferring full 100% ownership of this house to me. You are giving up your equity. You are giving up your title. You are giving me the house to cover the debt you saddled me with. But where will we live? She gasped. That is not my problem, I said. You have 1 week. 1 week to pack your things and leave. If you are not out by next Friday at noon, I will call this agent back and I will hand over the evidence of the forgery. My father looked up, tears streaming down his face. You are kicking us out. This is our home, Jasmine. We raised you here. You didn't raise me, Dad, I said, standing up. You tolerated me. And then you robbed me. This house isn't a home anymore. It is a crime scene. Sign the papers or get in the car with Caleb. Choose. With trembling hands, my father took the pen Dante offered. He signed his name. Then my mother signed hers. I took the papers and handed them to Dante. Thank you, officers, I said to the agent. I will not be pressing charges against my parents today. But take Mr. Montgomery away. I believe he has a reservation to keep. As they hauled Caleb out the door, he looked back at me one last time. There was no arrogance left, only pure, unadulterated fear. I watched the flashing lights fade into the night, leaving me standing in the wreckage of the dining room, holding the deed to a house I never wanted but had to take to save myself. 6 months later, the wind off Lake Michigan was bitingly cold, but inside the restaurant, it was warm and smelled of roasted garlic and expensive red wine. I sat at a corner table by the window looking out at the city lights. It was a Tuesday night. The restaurant was busy, filled with couples holding hands and business partners shaking on deals. I looked down at my phone. A notification popped up from Zillow. The status of the house on Maple Avenue had changed from for sale to sold. I had sold it 3 days after my parents moved out. I sold it to a nice young couple who didn't know about the ghosts in the walls. I used the proceeds to pay off the fraudulent mortgage, clear my credit report, and put a down payment on a brownstone closer to my office. My parents and Tiara were living in a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. My father had been forced to come out of retirement to work as a greeter at a hardware store to pay the rent. My mother, stripped of her status, and her church friends spent her days inside, too ashamed to show her face. And Tiara, my sister, the influencer, the golden child. The last I heard, she was working the checkout counter at a discount grocery store. She had deleted her social media accounts after the truth about Caleb came out. There were no more unboxing videos, no more lectures on positivity, just the beep of the scanner and the reality of a life she had never prepared for. As for Caleb, he took a plea deal. 10 years in federal prison. He was currently sitting in a cell in Indiana, presumably explaining to his cellmate about his visionary real estate projects. I put my phone away and picked up the menu. A shadow fell over the table. "Good evening, miss," the waiter said, smiling warmly. "Are we waiting for anyone else tonight? Or should I give you a few more minutes?" I looked up at him. He was young, eager, holding his notepad ready. I thought about the last time a waiter had asked me that question. I thought about the table full of empty plates and the family that expected me to pay for their feast. I thought about the fear, the anger, and the long, hard road to this moment. No, I said, smiling back. I am not waiting for anyone. It is just me. Very good, he said. Can I start you off with a glass of wine? Perhaps the house Cabernet? I shook my head. No. Bring me the list. I want the Chateau Margaux, the vintage bottle. His eyes widened slightly. Excellent choice. And for the appetizer, I will have the seafood tower, I said. And the bone and ribeye, medium rare. The waiter scribbled furiously. That is quite a feast for one person, he joked lightly. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the last 6 months lift off my shoulders. I felt the solidity of my own bank account, the security of my own name, and the peace of a life that finally belonged entirely to me. I am celebrating, I said. What is the occasion, he asked. Freedom, I replied. He nodded and walked away. I looked out the window at the city I had conquered. I was alone, yes. But I wasn't lonely. I was solvent. I was safe. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who was paying the bill. The screen fades to black. This journey taught me that DNA does not dictate loyalty. For years, I believed that love meant setting myself on fire to keep my family warm. I thought my worth was tied to how much debt I could absorb for them. But I learned that boundaries are not betrayal. True family doesn't demand you to bankrupt your future to fund their delusions. By walking away, I didn't just save my credit score. I saved my soul. Freedom isn't just about financial solvency. It is about the courage to cut the toxic ties that bind you, even if they share your last name. If this story inspired you to stand your ground, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. Have you ever had to audit the people closest to you? Let me know in the comments below.